Hello and welcome to God in Film, the podcast where a Christian and an atheist dive into the best that cinema has to offer and see if we can find any parallels with the gospel or any other Bible stories. I'm writer and last man on earth, Giles Goff.
And I'm librarian and unstoppable alien mind virus, Julia Hull.
And continuing with season 9 of this passion project that haunts my nightmares, we're looking at Pluribus, the Apple TV show starring Rhea Seehorn, the cosy, cuddly, post-apocalyptic science fiction television series created by Vince Gilligan. We'll be looking at utilitarianism and the flaws that come with it, the early church, and, the occasional demon. Julia, what do you think of this show?
This, I struggle to find a word other than, a mind F. You read the, tagline for this, which is, the most miserable woman on earth must save the planet from happiness.
Yeah.
Which, if you've watched Pluribus, just isn't what this is. It just did not prepare me for, frankly, how quite disturbing this show is. But I loved every second of it. I was just I was hooked from the first episode that I binged this in 2 days.
Yeah,
it is
very watchable. I don't think it's fair to call her the most depressed sort of woman on earth, is it?
The most miserable person on earth.
If
wouldn't you be miserable?
If your significant other dies and you're at the same time as the Earth gets taken over by aliens, I would have some feelings that were similar and proportionate, frankly.
Yeah.
I think that the thing I enjoy about her as a protagonist is she's never short of agency. She's always pushing forward, and I love that about her. She never kind of gives in to the despair. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. She allows herself to feel at certain points. There will be points where she goes, actually, you know what? I need to have just a small mental breakdown right now. And she has that, and then she gets back up and she keeps going. And I think we need a role model like that in today's television,
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Now, let's get into Julia's facts.
Ba-bam! I got some fun facts.
Awesome.
I did a little searching around. So pluribus is not a word that I've come across before.
Okay.
But it is the Latin word for many.
Yeah.
Or from many. But the stylized form of this, you may notice, is pluribus, but the I is like a 1.
Right, okay.
So on the title card it's noticeable, but also in some writings of it will be spelt that way. As a reference to one of the United States mottos, which is
pluribus
E pluribus unum, out of many, one.
Yeah.
Which is quite fitting, I think, for the hive mind thing that's going on. But it was quite difficult to name this show. Out of a list of 100, one other potential name of the show was Be Kind, Remind.
Be kind, remind. That's brilliant.
Something else that I found out is that almost all of the show is pretty much shot exclusively in Albuquerque. So Carol's cul-de-sac was built specifically for the show. Yeah. The Norwegian Ice Hotel, also in Albuquerque.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which really threw me off. And the Darien Gap, the very treacherous bit of rainforest. Excuse me. The very treacherous bit of rainforest that Manusos has to go through, that's also in Albuquerque. And not the real Darien Gap.
Right, okay. So that's basically how Doctor Who manages to film everything in and around Cardiff.
Yeah, I think so. They clearly had some influence from making one location really stretch very far.
Well, I remember listening to the sort of show's podcast that came out. One of the things they said was they set it in New Mexico so you could turn and look at the mountains in there. There was at one point where they were thinking about putting it in LA or something, but that would mean you would have to kind of hide the mountains in every shot, and it just seemed easier to do it that way.
I think one of the big challenges with this show that was mentioned is getting spaces that are empty. The airport that they end up in Spain, Bilbao Airport, I think, is not Bilbao Airport. It's another building that they made to look like it, because being able to empty out that airport for a day just wasn't possible. So the specific and quite unsettling movement of the others, I think is how I've seen them described most, or the hive mind, was done without any CGI. So it's 100% real actors, real people.
Real extras.
But it was put together by a stunt coordinator called Nito Lariosa, if that's how you pronounce it.
Lito, if you got a problem with the way we pronounce it,
call me.
and we'll apologise profusely. Come on the show.
So he's also worked on Avatar and Suicide Squad. But he was brought in to choreograph the actors, and he took inspiration specifically from shoals of fish and flocks of birds. So every scene was outlined to perfection, very much like a marching band or drill sergeant. So there were colour-coded groupings, it had marks on the floor, exact step counts that they had to hit at certain points, vocal cues from PAs, that whole kit and caboodle. It was a very well-oiled machine. Yeah,
so Vince Gilligan said what he would do in some points is they would like split up the screen for like wide group shots, you know? So he'd have somebody say, okay, well, you look at this quarter, you look at this quarter, you look at this bit, and just, you know what it's like when I know what it's like when you're filmmaking and you're so focused on the one thing that you forget this glaring, obvious problem over here, or this bit, or that bit there, and it's
like a coffee cup left on set from a very recognisable, non-fantasy coded coffee brand.
Exactly, that's one. And I think they were talking about how with the others, it's difficult because you want everybody to sort of take the same amount of steps, you want them to move in the same way, but also not so that they're like robots. So they're still their own individual people, they're still in their own kind of bodies, if you like. It's trying to find that balance of the individuality and the hive mind at the same time. I think that's, from a performance perspective, I think that's a fascinating challenge.
The very last fact I've got for you today, there's one bit, I think it's in episode 4 or 5, just after the grenade goes off. One of the cleanup crew, Carol, turns around and goes, "Wait a minute, you're the mayor." And she's right, because that is the actual real-life mayor of Albuquerque.
That's brilliant. And he does that bit where he goes, "Yeah, thank you for your vote." I love that.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
My work here is done.
Thank you. Just a quick reminder that if you would like us to stay on the air and ad-free, you can go to www.patreon.com/The God in Film Podcast and sign up to our Bishop Waller-Bridge tier. That's where you can hear extended interviews like those of Laura Jane Hunt on Supernatural and our very own Julia talking at length about the Jedi Order. At length. Strap in, guys. As well as special bonus episodes like our God in U2 and God in Gaming episodes. And if you're a bit strapped for cash and want to support us without spending money, then please leave us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, keying it into the bonnet of your ex's car, Facebook, Podbean, or wherever you're listening to this. It makes a big difference in pointing people towards the show. Now it's time for Finding the Faith in the Film.
Ba-ba!
Now, ladies and gents, if there's one woman who is allowed to do whatever she wants when it comes to this podcast, it would be Claire. She's the first lady of God in Film, and it's a good idea to keep her sweet, frankly. But if there were 2 women who were allowed to do whatever they want when it comes to this podcast, well, obviously the second would of course be Julia, who not only chooses certain episodes like The Craft or Dungeons and Dragons, but she does the research, she books the guests, she interviews the guests. And if there were 3 women who are allowed to do whatever they want when it comes to this podcast, the third would ultimately be one Natalie Minaker. Natalie has been a supporter of this podcast from the very beginning, and we tend to let her pick the episodes she wants to talk about because, honestly, it just saves time.
And they're bangers.
The woman can talk at an Olympic level, and if she wants something, she will grind you down. She once said that she wanted to do Pluribus. She held up a picture of my family and set fire to it. Natalie, welcome to the show.
Hello, Giles and Julia. This is a recording. At the tone, you can leave a message to request anything you might need from Natalie Minaker. We'll do our best to provide religious and philosophical content. Our feelings for the God in Film podcast haven't changed, but after everything that's happened, we just need a little space. Hello.
Oh,
Hi.
man, I love it. Hey, Nat, you okay? Tell you what we'll do, Nat. If you want to crack on and tell us some of the main things you're thinking about when it comes to Pluribus.
I loved Pluribus. I thought it was so good. I watched it all the way through twice. But it kind of really got me thinking about morality and my own moral worldview. And, as much as an atheist can have an existential crisis, it did sort of get me thinking a little bit. Particularly about a worldview that I don't necessarily fully ascribe to, but I've always leaned towards, which is utilitarianism. I just wondered if you guys, before I jump in with my spiel, I mean, what do you guys know about utilitarianism?
So, utilitarianism is not exclusively, but largely sort of developed by Jeremy Bentham, my man Jerry B, from, I want to say, around the Enlightenment era, so I want to say like 1700s.
18th to 19th century, yeah.
18th to 19th century. And the way he described it, if I'm right, is something, I think the wording he used was something like the most pleasure for the most people.
Yeah.
It's sometimes interpreted as the most happiness for the most people. I tend to interpret it as the most good for the most people.
I think happiness and good kind of are interchangeable, really, when we're talking about utilitarianism.
Yeah. The only one that creeps me out is the pleasure bit, because I'm like, that's...
Yeah.
It has connotations.
It has connotations.
I think those are more 21st century connotations rather than like 18th, 19th century.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's essentially like whatever action causes the greatest amount of happiness for the greatest number is good. And it's almost like doing a calculation with it. So
Tell them what utilitarian is, Nat.
Utilitarianism has often been called what happens when STEM people try to do philosophy. It's we turn big ideas into an equation, but because I'm a sciencey kind of person, like that does actually appeal to me. So he had the felicific calculus, which is talking about so intensity. So intense pleasure is worth more than mild pleasure, or intense suffering is worth less than is more negative than mild suffering. Duration, so short-term happiness is better, is not as good as long-term happiness. The certainty, so a high certainty of happiness is worth more than a low certainty. And you can kind of almost weigh up in an equation to figure out what is the right course of action.
I mean, you started talking about intense short-term pleasure, and
I know I saw you giggling. I just went past it, and I thought I'm going to be the grown-up.
I'm going to be the grown-up in the situation, and it turns out I'm not. So that's great.
I know.
So
I'm used to dealing with classrooms full of giggling teenagers. Selective ignoring of innuendo is basically genetic for me now. So yeah, but Pluribus really kind of forced me to kind of confront some of the assumptions I've had. I've always kind of defaulted to utilitarianism.
That's fascinating.
Like not solely, but I think it's a good rule of thumb. So like this show kind of made me turn inwards and make me think like how I, Natalie Minaker, actually make ethical decisions. And turns out the programming in my ethical code background program is a little bit more complicated than I realised, because the amount of times when I was writing my notes to this, I'd write, I believe, da, 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 and then immediately delete that thing after I think of half a dozen exceptions of when I don't actually believe that thing.
This is delightful, because normally it's me having the existential crisis and having to question everything I've held dear for 30 years. This is quite fun to be on the outside of it for once.
Atheists, like, we think about this stuff too.
Love it.
This really had me sat down with my husband being like, okay, so if I was in a hive
sorry, sat
mind,
down with your
would you
who?
still love me? With my husband.
Your husband.
Like, if I was in a hive mind and I wasn't me anymore, would you still love me? And also if I was a worm.
Yes, I was going to say, it's always, would you still love me if I was a worm? So for me, I suppose I've always veered towards utilitarianism as an ethical guideline. Even before I'd ever really come across the concept and the word, I would usually rely heavily on thinking through the consequences of an action to decide whether or not it's wrong. So as an atheist, I don't have a belief in God. I've got no religion. I don't believe in... I know you're working on me, Giles.
I'm working on it.
Dude, it's been like 22 years. I mean, I'm not saying no. I'm
patient. I can take my time. I'm not in a rush.
Okay. You see, I just think one day you're going to see the light and realise that, actually deep down you're an atheist. So,
yeah, I mean,
it
I'm
goes
not,
both ways.
Yeah, like, I'm not worried about anybody else being right.
Yeah.
Because I look at everybody else's religion and I'm like, yeah, mine's better. But, like, if the atheists are right, then I'm okay with it. Like, because if...
Well, you won't know, will you? You won't
exactly.
Be there
I'm not gonna worry about it,
Yeah. It's one of the things, like, I do hope I'm wrong. I hope you're right.
But it's like nothing I've found so far has contradicted the fact that Jesus is a great bunch of lads. Do you know what I mean? Like, Christians, not great. The church, not great. Catholicism, but everything, I can't find anything that says that Jesus wasn't great, and therefore following him has given me a pretty great life in a lot of ways. It got me a great wife and some amazing kids
and an awesome podcast.
So I have no complaints so far.
Well, you can argue that's a very utilitarian argument you just made there, Giles.
Right?
So
is that the maximum happiness?
Yeah.
Right.
So if your religion has brought you pleasure and happiness in this life, then whether or not that you're right is kind of an added bonus.
Yeah.
Like, you've already got the benefit from it.
There is studies, I can't remember them off the top of my head, but it does talk about the idea of like religious people being happier.
Oh, they totally are. I know the research. I always say to the students, so, like, it's cause and effect. Is it that religion makes you happier, or are happier people more drawn to religion? Because a lot of the research is correlational, and it could just be that when you're religious, it kind of comes with a community.
Yeah.
And it could be the community that.
No, it's 100% the community aspect, because you've got people who are happy to come and feed your cat, or to look at it. Like, the high watermark for me is when our friend Helen came to play with Riley because Claire's dad was dying, and we just needed a little bit of space to pack, and the fact that you've got people around you that you love and trust, and vice versa, that's nothing quite like it,
I feel like that kind of ties in with Pluribus a bit, doesn't it? Like, what are the, that's the ultimate community, isn't it? I mean, obviously it's, without all that pesky free will, but
and individuality.
Oh, yeah, who needs that? Like I was saying, like, for me, I don't have a religion. I don't believe in any kind of divine principles. I don't have a holy text that tells me what to do. That sounded awful, like, as in, like, religious people just follow laws blindly. Know what I mean? There's no guidance there.
I mean, some of them do.
Yeah. Okay, so for me, there is no, like, divine reward. So for me, deciding whether or not something is right or wrong, I can see and I can understand tangible, measurable consequences in this life. And to me, that feels like a really good measure of whether something's moral or not. So, I mean, really basic, like, year 7 example. Giles, if I punch you in the face, it is going to cause you physical and emotional suffering. These are things that can be seen and measured, and these are bad consequences.
Your
you in the face
flirting needs work.
Oh, baby, if I was flirting with you, you'd know it.
I know.
Because it would be super awkward.
Because you would have punched me in the face and there'd be a broken
Yeah, exactly. But if I give you a hug instead, this will bring about feelings of warmth and love, hopefully.
Yeah.
I know you're a big hugger. And these are good consequences, so the action is good. I mean, huge oversimplification, and life is rarely that black and white, but as principles go, it's a good start. And I think because my background is in science rather than religion, to me, utilitarianism just makes sense. It's often why I have issues when people have ethical objections to things like sexual morality, like sex before marriage, homosexuality. When people object to things like sex before marriage on like a moral level, like objecting to other people making decisions that do not impact them at all. So, for example, open relationships. Now, me personally, I would not want that. But if the people in that relationship are consenting to it and it's not harming anyone, then I do not think that is immoral, because for me, there's no higher moral, ethical guidelines that we have to adhere to. Like, does this action cause harm to people? If not, then it's fine. Like, that's the key thing. If anyone is harmed, if it's non-consensual, if it's an affair that's happening behind someone's back, well, then that's suffering. But if consenting people choose to make that choice, then for me, I'm always thinking, show me the suffering. If you can't show me where the suffering is, then can you call something immoral?
Yeah, but hang on. Sometimes we don't always know what the suffering is or where the suffering is going to. If you knew going into something that this is going to cause you trauma, you just wouldn't do it. So this is one of those areas where I end up putting my conservative hat on, not because I don't think that people should be allowed to do it, but just because I just don't think it works. You know, I'm very skeptical of it, because there seems
obviously if it doesn't work, then it causes suffering. So therefore, in that situation, it would be wrong. But let's say hypothetically, a couple are in a loving relationship, they are having an open relationship, and just assume for sake of argument that it's fine, no one's harmed by it, then would that action still be immoral? That's the key thing. For me, no, because no one's being harmed.
Yeah, and the question then becomes is like, how, over what period of time are we gauging, and what scale are we gauging whether whether someone gets harmed or not? But
you could say that about anything. You could say, well, you know, I got married, I'm divorced. Does that mean that I should not have got married because it had the potential to cause harm further down the line? Utilitarianism is all about doing the best with the information that you have right now. And if an action does not produce suffering, then it isn't immoral.
Yeah.
And just say, I guess it ties in with what Bentham was saying, like it's the certainty of happiness and suffering. And that is always going to be a bit of an unknown.
Yeah, well, hang on. If you're talking about, does it cause suffering or does it not cause suffering, that's starting to get into a universal law. The whole thing with Bentham, as I understand it, is about the greatest amount of suffering or the greatest amount of happiness. So, for example, you could argue that eugenics is a utilitarian view. So, I guess what I want to know is, like, how do we measure the intensity of the suffering of one person against the convenience of other people? How does that? What's the framework for that?
I mean, utilitarianism, by the way, it is not perfect, because you can justify really unethical things with utilitarian principles. But what Bentham did say is that every individual should be counted as equal when it comes to suffering. So the suffering of the people who were being killed by the Nazis is not going to be outweighed by the benefit it could bring to others, because that suffering is so overwhelmingly intense.
Okay.
Like, if you think of the balance of weighing it up, 6 million people, who actually does get the benefit from that? But you're right with eugenics, because if eugenics is kind of like, what happens if we take social utilitarianism to an extreme and we start saying it will be better for everyone? So yeah, it's absolutely not on a national level. Utilitarianism, I suppose, does break down a bit, but for me in my day-to-day life, it's as good a principle as any, I suppose, when you're just trying to decide, what should I make this comment to a person? Is hurting their feelings actually going to bring about more good if it's an honest comment that needs to be said? Do you get what I mean? Like,
I do. We talked about this in the Oppenheimer episode, that effectively you can use utilitarianism to justify the dropping of the bomb in Hiroshima. And I guess what I'm interested in is where do we use utilitarianism, and where do we start to apply universal laws? Where can we establish what is a universal? Okay.
Yeah, so there's a middle ground because later, in fact, in like the 20th century, you have other philosophers coming along and going, well, actually, with utilitarianism, we could kind of break it into two. We've got act and rule utilitarianism.
Okay.
Act utilitarianism is basically each individual action judged separately. So does this specific action maximize happiness right now for the people who are here? But rule utilitarianism is more general. It's like, what rules should we, if everybody followed a particular rule, what would it maximize happiness? So the classic example is, and this is actually one that you see in The Good Place, but it predates that. A doctor who's got 5 patients who all need organs.
Oh, yeah.
And there's one guy who comes in who happens to be a match for everybody. Now, act utilitarianism would say the moral thing to do is kill that one person, take their organs to save 5 people, because you are saving 5 people for the sake of one. On balance of it, yeah, that makes sense. Rule utilitarianism would say, well, do we want to live in a society where people can randomly be snatched off the street and have their organs harvested? In the long term, that is going to bring about much more suffering than the short-term gains. So no, that is not ethical. So that would be a modern twist on it, which I suppose is kind of leaning more towards or universal moral rules, but they're universal moral rules that have their basis in that utilitarian argument. It only becomes a universal rule if it's got the argument behind it that this is going to cause more happiness. Giles is thinking deeply.
No, I'm just trying to
Loading.
sort of witness back, like, yeah, I don't disagree particularly with anything on this, and I know the idea of a universal, any kind of universal moral rule isn't sexy. It's not sort of in vogue, and it's not the sort of thing you can impose on people. But I feel like it's the kind of thing that if I give examples, then it becomes obvious, you know? So, for example, is it ever okay to torture babies for fun?
I'm going to assume no.
No, I feel well.
Yeah. I could ask pretty much anybody on any continent in any culture that question, and their answer would be, "Holy crap, Giles, you're not allowed to babysit for us anymore." You know, of course not. So we can complicate the idea of universal moral laws, but I can find them fairly easily. Do you know what I mean?
Do you know what I wonder? I wonder if we're basically coming to the same conclusions, but you're going top down, I'm going bottom up. So you're top down, like I'm assuming you might argue that universal moral laws are going to come from God.
I mean, I feel so basic suggesting it, but like kinda, yeah. You know.
So for me, I'm the opposite. My universal moral laws come from the ground up. They're laws that make sense because they bring about more happiness and less suffering. So we meeting in the middle.
Yeah.
We've just getting there in slightly different ways.
My friend Phil Watson had a really good way of talking about it, because obviously when we think about them in terms of things like the most famous example of universal laws given from God to humanity is
the Ten Commandments.
10 Commandments, yeah. Okay. My friend Phil, his argument is that it's a tonal thing. Instead of hearing it as "thou shalt not commit adultery," it's more like God going, "Don't do that. Don't cheat on your wife. That's not going to be good for anybody." You know, it's trying to sort of put it across in that context. So I guess the flip side to utilitarianism, and maybe I'm skipping ahead a bit, is I want to say Kantian
ethics,
moral
yeah.
ethics, yeah, which is just as flawed on the other side. Can you explain it?
I've not read a huge amount of Kant, but it's basically the idea that you have these moral laws, and a strict Kantian would say that you cannot break them at all, no circumstances.
So like
cheating.
Yeah, so like the classic example for that is, do not lie. Lying is wrong. So if you were harbouring somebody in your home and who was someone was trying to murder, and the murderer came and knocked on the door and said, "Are they inside?" You would have to say to that person, "Yes, they are," because lying is wrong.
Yeah.
It's the idea that if everybody followed this law, everything would be great. So we should all follow those laws.
Do you know what? It's funny you mentioned that, because I was doing like a kind of elective Bible course at Nazarene Theological College, And you know that moment when you realise maybe you're in the wrong class? When I was like, obviously it's okay to lie in certain circumstances. Like, if the Nazis turn up at your door saying, we are looking for some Jews, are they in your house? Obviously you go, no! And just the fact that everyone kind of went quiet, I was like, I'm gonna find another class, because that's also becoming a much more live debate than it used to be. There are people that need help, and there are people that are trying to help. We're seeing this particularly in Minneapolis at the moment. The Catholics have a brilliant workaround for this. I think I've mentioned it in the Daredevil episode, where if you ask a Catholic priest a question about something and they do know the answer, but because they've heard it in confession, they say, I don't know, I have no idea. But there's a little asterisk where it's to be understood that they are saying, I have no idea, outside of the seal of confessional. You know?
Yeah, I think like Kantian ethics would work if every single person was a Kantian. But all you need is like a few bad actors and they will be able to take advantage of this Kantian utopia for their own ends. It ignores human nature, I think.
I would make an argument that pretty much everything would work if everybody all agreed with it. Do you know what I mean?
Comes back to Pluribus.
Yeah, well, it brings us back to Pluribus, but also the Crusades and Christian nationalism and everything. This sense of wanting to impose your views and your desires on everybody, whether it's Christian nationalists or whether it's flipping Gene Roddenberry and his view of the future in Star Trek. The wouldn't it be great if everybody agreed with me approach is that's a thing that keeps coming back over and over. You know,
there are very few moral issues where I have an absolutist stance, but there is one thing that I am absolutely opposed to without exception, which is the death penalty. And I can give you like a really detailed utilitarian breakdown, but ultimately my opinion on that does just come down to one simple belief, which is it is wrong for one human to premeditatively take the life of another. And I don't think any amount of, you could provide me with utilitarian arguments for why I'm wrong. I know that particular view, it's not based on utilitarianism. It's just this fundamental belief that is a wrong thing. And so I don't, I do have some moral absolutes.
So putting aside that your one moral absolute was the thou shalt not kill, and the torturing babies for fun bit, you are up for discussion.
Well, excuse me. I feel like you're putting words in my mouth a bit there.
I don't think so. I think you said you have one moral rule, and that's the thing.
Okay.
But then obviously the next thing is trolley problem of like. And I'm watching it play out in Daredevil Born Again at the moment, where Daredevil won't kill Wilson Fisk, the kingpin, because it's wrong to murder. It's like, God, this dude is killing an awful lot of people. So
see, for that, I would my morality would be a bit more like, okay, well, what's going to reduce the most amount of suffering? But if someone is in prison, they are not a threat. They will not ever harm anyone else again, then I don't think killing that person could be justified. It's just, okay. I don't think something... It's that's why I say about the death penalty. It's not killing in general. I can see utilitarian arguments for when that might be okay, but the death penalty, I cannot see a justification for it. The person is locked away. They are not going to cause any more harm. It just comes down to revenge. And I think because I'm an atheist and I don't believe in an afterlife, this life is it. Yep. And I think we should preserve human life as much as we can for people who want it. That's why euthanasia is a whole other area which I'm not going to get into. But death penalty just feels wrong, and I know that's not very utilitarian.
Yeah, no, that is a preaching to the choir.
No, I know.
And there's been so many cases where it's turned out that then the person was innocent.
Yeah.
Even the cases where it seems 100%. What if you're wrong and you just killed somebody?
See, to me, that's a moot point. Even if we could make sure that 100% of the people who are executed deserve it, it's still wrong.
Oh yeah.
I mean, with most heartfelt respect, should innocent men be killed or not is not a moot point. Good Lord.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So, like,
another way to think about that is you only get to kill somebody once. If you really want revenge, then keeping them alive, where you can kick them in the balls every day, is a much more sort of long-standing option. You know?
See, I also am quite opposed to torture too, I'm afraid. So
Just a little bit of torture as a treat. You know, as part of a daily balanced diet. You know?
Yeah. Make sure eat 5 fruit and veg a day. Eat your fibre. Do a bit of torture. Yeah. Not too much. It's
not
all
too
fine.
much.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, how do you feel about things that would result in torture?
What like?
So, for example, NHS waiting lists are impossibly long because they've been underfunded. And then there are people who have chronic conditions who are experiencing pain every single day as a result of this. Do we class that as torture by underfunding? Or do we look at what the Americans do where they make healthcare, which is a basic human right, they're making people pay for it? Does that class as torture?
I think torture by definition is the intention is to cause harm. Whereas with what you're describing there, I don't, as much as we might dislike politicians, I don't think they're actively setting out to cause harm. The harm is being caused, but that's a side effect of bad decisions they're making. I would say that is the distinction.
Okay, but this is something I've and maybe we're coming back to act utilitarianism again, and somebody might not be trying to hurt you, but by the carelessness of their actions, they end up incredibly hurting you.
Yeah.
The famous example I can think of is Boris Johnson, who decides that coming into number 10 and becoming Prime Minister is a really good time to start his second or third family. And as a result, he is very distracted at the one time when we need a Prime Minister to not be distracted. And as a result, what was it, 150,000 people die? And I don't think Boris went into that thinking, gosh, I'd quite like 150,000 people to die. But he didn't care enough to stop it. So again, coming into my act utilitarianism aspect, if you have this much blood on your hands, does it really make a difference to me whether you just didn't mean to or not?
I think it's, I get what you're saying, but I think it's, you know, utilitarianism's all about like the process that you use to make decisions. If you aren't thinking through decisions and you just do stuff, then the consequences are kind of moot in your decision making process. But you're right, like maybe he, you know, people in government should think more carefully about the consequences of things. I know obviously it is immoral.
Yeah. I haven't worked out why gross negligence in office isn't a crime. You know, I can't figure that out. Listen, we should probably talk about Pluribus at some point.
That is my next point. So back to Pluribus then. So while I was watching it, I shared Carol's outrage at what was happening to the world. I felt, you know, vicarious anger, knowing what had happened. Saw the people on the planet become this collective hive mind. A world of happiness zombies. But then my utilitarian programming kicked in, and I asked myself, okay, but where is the suffering? And this is where it was like, okay, this feels wrong, but why? So, I mean, I'm just going to park the two rather large elephants in the room, which is the number of people who died in the initial takeover and the fact that the food supplies might run out, because obviously those are big issues. But I want to talk about the actual hive mind itself, like the ethics of that. So aside from the 13 humans who are left immune, suffering now on the planet is kind of at a minimum. Even within those 13, it seems only really to be Carol and Manousos who have any kind of severe hardship. Maybe Kusamayu too, before she became one with the hive mind. That was heartbreaking.
What was the woman who I think it's the Indian woman.
Oh, Lakshmi, who keeps phoning her up.
Oh my god, you made my child cry.
Yeah, I didn't you just want to slap her? But at the same time, as a parent, I totally get it. Like, I would be holding on to my child. They're still my child. And
I think part of the reason why Manousos and Carol are able to have such a detached view of it is because they literally don't have anyone.
They haven't got anyone
to live vicariously through. You know, if the hive mind looks like your husband and looks like your child,
it's a whole other thing.
You're going to be reluctant to get rid of that, right?
If Helen, Carol's wife, had survived, would Carol have been a lot happier? would her response to this be different, or might she have gone even further the other way, like into being angry at what's happening? You know, but I mean, Diabate, he is loving it. I love him when he turns up on Air Force One.
I want to love him, but also he just, the whole, oh, now I'm going to live out my like Playboy fantasy. Just it doesn't.
It's icky.
It's icky.
Consent.
Yeah,
and also like they're one person. Like that person is also like Lakshmi's kid. Do you know what I mean?
When Carol has sex with the pirate lady, who I can't remember her. Zosha. You're effectively having sex with the entire planet, you know?
Yeah, it's just,
Yeah, so, like, I mean, but for the rest of the world, aside from the 13 who are left, like, everything's kind of peachy. Like, wars end overnight, crime gone, abuse, neglect, sexual violence, vanished, poverty, gone. Starvation, we can assume, is either gone or on its way to eradication because there's a global food redistribution going on.
In the short term.
Yeah, short term.
Well,
long term's an issue, but short term, what I mean, so, like, this is, it's a world of absolute equality. Words like persecution, racism, sexism, any other kind of ism you can think of have disappeared. It's genuine world peace. So the question I was thinking then is, like, how does Pluribus fare in a utilitarian sense? And for me, it's hard to explain why it's wrong if you just use utilitarianism. Because if utilitarianism is all about reducing suffering, increasing happiness, then basically Pluribus is a utilitarian utopia, suffering minimised, happiness maximised, like in the Jeremy Bentham sense that it's all about maximising happiness. Haven't figured out if this is highlighting an issue of utilitarian theory or it's just a good example of what happens if we take it to its logical conclusion. Even when we learn that the others are eating humans, ultimately kind of seems justifiable. I mean, John Cena made some excellent points.
John Cena made
How
excellent
awesome
points.
was he?
Yeah,
He was so funny.
But Nat, listen to what you're saying, right? You're saying, if we just ignore all the terrible things that happened, there's really no downsides, you know?
But the thing is that those terrible things, like the people who have died, like when the takeover happened, like that can't be undone. The thing about the future and the starving to death, obviously, yes, that is going to be an issue. But what I'm talking about here is ignoring those two things. Imagine those didn't happen. Would the collective hive mind of Pluribus be unethical?
Yeah.
It's going to lead to an ethical problem, but is it going to be unethical in the here and now?
Yeah,
but this is the thing with utilitarianism, it's very hard to point out why. So it's highlighting that maybe, for me at least, I was like, well, hang on. Utilitarianism would say this is fine. It doesn't feel fine. Where's the logical issue here? So, I mean, I started then thinking, okay, so what have we lost in this world? So all individuality is gone. It might be upsetting to the outsiders, the people who were not part of the hive mind, but the others themselves seem unbothered. They talk about how wonderful this existence is. They are not suffering because of the loss of their individuality. Again, minimising suffering, maximising happiness, utilitarianism, bingo. So then I thought, okay, well, what else have we lost? And for me personally, the big tragedy, I think, is the loss of the arts.
Yeah.
There are no new books being written, no new music being produced, no movies.
They all get really excited when she starts reading, starts writing a new book, because there is nothing new left coming out.
Exactly. I mean, and it's impossible for any of the others to experience anything new, because every single person on the planet has listened to every song ever made, read every book ever written, watched every movie ever filmed. And as a writer myself, the thought of existing in a world without new literature, movies, TV shows, etc. feels like a half-life. And in the world of Pluribus, the arts are irrelevant. No one's telling new stories. So I thought, well, maybe that's why it's wrong. But then I was thinking, well, what is the point of art? Like, I'm going to steal a little bit from the BBC here and, I'm going to give my argument and then you're going to rip it to shreds. But the BBC, they argue that the arts are to entertain, inform and educate. Well, education and information spreading aren't needed anymore because everyone's all connected. And what is the point of entertainment when everybody's in a blissed out sense of contentment all the time anyway? If you're always happy, then what need have you for entertainment? I thought, well, art also serves the purpose of helping us step into someone else's shoes, see the world from a different viewpoint. Also pointless in Pluribus. Okay, but art has the function of holding up a mirror to our world. It highlights injustices and inequalities. Doesn't need to do that anymore either. So, okay, we've lost art, but the people in the hive mind, it is not going to cause them any suffering at all, because all of the stuff that art does, they no longer need. But then,
that's not
you
right.
do make the point about, like, they are excited that there's a new book, but they're not suffering because there's a lack of a new book.
Something that crossed my mind is like, because the hive mind can only know everything that everyone on the planet knew at the time that it took over, right?
Yeah.
So surely there's some stuff that just got lost. Like, surely there must be books that no one now living has read.
Yeah,
there will be films that people now living have not seen. There will be some information that is not preserved somehow, and of course there will be no urge to discover that information. Because they don't
know what they don't know as well.
They don't know what they don't know. So it's like, I don't know, if you had one person's mathematical theory that they'd been working on, and then they died in 1972, and their stuff then went into a storage thing and nobody read it since then. That's gone. Things like that personal family heritage that was not passed down, or recipe books but do you know what I mean? There's got to be stuff that's filtered through the gaps that is never to be rediscovered again.
Yeah.
Which messes me up. I don't like that.
So the reason why art is important, you're right with educate, entertain, inform, all that sort of stuff. One of the purposes that art serves is it becomes like an experiment room. It's a petri dish for things that you don't get to experiment on in real life. Okay? And you get to observe the consequences from that. As a result, people get to use art to experiment with changes in society and culture and all that sort of thing. We have seen more sort of gay couples and more married gay couples in art and fiction than most people are seeing in real life, and that then starts to impact on the culture. Then on a technological level, I'm going to come back to Star Trek again, but they're using the communicators, which then somebody has an idea of like, oh, what if it was we could actually do that, and from that you get mobile phones, and from that you get the existence of the world as it is, So if there's no new art, there's no new place to test out ideas, and there's no new ideas. So the issue is that the society is not only going to starve to death, because again, utilitarianism and whatever, they have their own Kantian moral imperative where they can't pick fruit. So they're all going to die out, and even if they weren't going to die out, the culture would stagnate to the point where you get the human beings on the ship in Wall-E.
But would they though? Because they've already shown that they can come up with new ideas. Because they worked on a cure for Carol and the others, they were able to develop whatever science it is that allowed them to create a what's her name, Kusumaya, when she breathes in that stuff. So they can create new stuff. But would they create new art? Would there be a need for that?
It doesn't further the prime directive, right? Which is to pass on the joining. So once they're done with Earth, I think it's not really important. I think in the season, but they kind of mention in passing that they're working on building an antenna to then shoot this RNA sequence
onto the next
to
one.
Somewhere to the next place, right? It's essentially it's a parasite.
Yeah.
I
know. From Last of Us.
There's like a parasite. I don't know if it is cordyceps based, but it will make ants and things really, really brightly coloured and climb up to like the
the
top,
zombie thing, yeah.
just so that they can be eaten and die. And then, do you know what I mean? There's no other. The prime directive is to reproduce and to get further. So I don't see that they would have any desire to do that unless.
I know, like Vince Gilligan has said, I think there's a 3-series arc, so I'm assuming like these are questions that we will get answered, because I'm a big Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul fan, and like that dude is like 3 series mentally ahead all the time. He doesn't just do it on the fly. But yeah, like Pluribus ticks every Jeremy Bentham utilitarian box. So suffering gone, happiness maxed out, job done, gold star for utilitarianism. But then it's like, well, is this actually happiness or just the absence of the ability to feel anything else? Because in Pluribus, no one, Giles, you've mentioned a few times, no one's choosing to be happy. It's not a consensual happiness. Once you have it, you are like actively consenting to it, but that initial joining, no one asked for that. And if you remove the possibility of not being happy, does happiness even mean anything? Utilitarian tells us to maximize happiness, but what kind of happiness are we maximizing? Is it messy, complicated human happiness that comes with risk and choice and the possibility of getting things wrong? Or is this kind of like airbrush?
Yeah, happiness loses all its meaning if you have nothing to contrast it with.
Exactly, yeah. And like we feel all the time, fine all the time, because we literally can't feel any way. And so my kind of utilitarian thought process, which I've always had, which is like, okay, well, if something is wrong, show me the suffering. It wobbles here. And so this is why, like, I'm not necessarily here defending utilitarianism. I'm showing that actually I'm thinking that maybe it is massively flawed. I've always known it's flawed, but it's flawed in a new way for me now. But then this is where John Stuart Mill comes in. So he had a development on this, and he actually argued not all pleasures are equal. He talks about the higher pleasures like intellectual, moral, emotional pleasures, and then lower pleasures like nice physical sensations. So it's better, his quote was, "It is better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a fool satisfied." So eating a chocolate cake might actually cause more instantaneous pleasure than reading poetry, but because poetry is a higher pleasure and cake is a lower pleasure, it is therefore worth more. So in this world, in Pluribus, John Stuart Mill would be looking at and be going like, yeah, this isn't what you think it is. Because Mill is saying that not all happiness is created equal. Things like creating, thinking, questioning, choosing your own path, that is actually a much higher kind of happiness. Basically everyone in Pluribus is just constantly eating chocolate cake and they're being happy about it, and they've lost that deeper, higher happiness. Everyone's content, everyone's calm, everything's fine, but everything is really flat. No struggle, no growth, no creativity, no individuality. All of the things that Mill would say that we should be doing, wrestling with big ideas, writing, making music, the things that make us properly human. So Mill is also utilitarianism, but he's a bit more nuanced. So even if Pluribus is technically maximizing happiness, Mill would argue it's the wrong kind of happiness. It's not the rich, chaotic version that comes from being an individual. It's better to have a world where people can think and struggle and choose, even if that does mean some unhappiness, than a world where everyone feels fine, but no one is actually living. So that's, I kind of was able to like muddle my way through and go, okay, so maybe we move away from Jeremy Bentham and we look more towards John Stuart Mill, this idea that actually happiness has levels and there are some happinesses which are worth more than others. And I think with that, the world of Pluribus, you can say it doesn't work, it's unethical. Yay, I got there.
It's
glad
even
you could join us.
The survivors are kind of, in most of them anyway, are in that lower happiness cycle, right? Because Monsieur Diabate is reenacting Casino Royale and hanging out in Las Vegas.
Well, Carol does it as well. When Carol and Zosha go on their lovely world tour and have a whole ski lodge to themselves, she's so fallen into that, lower pleasures and forgotten.
When you can get anything that you want, even something that ordinarily you couldn't have, like the diner that they rebuild specifically for Carol, which had burned down, I don't know, like 20 years ago, or a meal that you had 2 decades ago.
This links
Do you
in
know
with
what I
something
mean?
somebody was saying about how when you're Mark Zuckerberg or any kind of billionaire, collecting stuff just stops being fun. Because let's say you want to get into watches and like fancy watches, so you buy like 5 of the coolest watches in existence, and you didn't have to strive for them, you didn't have to hunt them down or anything like that. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. One of the things about the human condition, and one of the things that I think even God realizes, is that it's the friction, it's the difficulties that make us grow.
Yeah.
If we don't have that, if we are basically just spoon-fed everything, we never grow, and we will just effectively just be bratty little zombies.
I don't know about you, but did you sit there and go, okay, like if I was a survivor like Carol, like what would I do? And part of me is like, oh well, maybe I'd go to the Louvre and wander around without any distractions or people, or maybe I'd go to Buckingham Palace and go and see like the Queen's bedroom, or maybe I'd go to Japan. Like I do all these things, but then also it's like, well, it's gonna sound weird, but I didn't earn it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I didn't like put aside some money and save up and go to Paris and go and see the Louvre and organise that myself. I didn't somehow wrangle my way to go hang out in Lizzie's bedroom. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just
like. It's like the difference between being an astronaut and going on a spaceship because Jeff Bezos wanted you there.
Yeah, it's like when you got so far in a Lego game that you could unlock like a thing that just made it that you didn't lose lives every time that you got hit, so you could just walk through levels without worrying about dying and having to restart because you invested enough time. Like it's not the same.
Yeah.
I did love the bit though where she went into the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum and just went, that'll look better on my wall. Like I could totally imagine myself doing that. Like I'm gonna just like have the Mona Lisa in my bedroom just because I can.
I would
just
just
quite fun.
deck out a house with like every cool artifact that I adore, like Alfred Jewel, be it the Rosetta Stone. Do you know what I would do, actually? I'd go and put the Elgin marbles back on the Parthenon.
Nice.
Who's going to stop me?
I would remove all the speed bumps from my local area because they kept messing with my Batmobile. That seems the reason. Listen,
go for a joyride.
Have we said everything we need to say about utilitarianism?
I'm done. That's going to need a lot of editing, but I'm done.
Yep. There are some interesting faith aspects that I wanted to think about here, and I think in many ways what I found with Pluribus wasn't a strict faith parallel per se, but I kind of found that it explored biblical themes by looking at the inverse. The first example I could think of was, do you know the biblical character of Legion? No? You know her?
No.
Like I am Legion, one of many, or
close, really close.
Oh,
okay.
the guy filled with demons.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I do know
yes,
that.
yeah.
So it's Mark 5, chapter verses 1 to 10. On the other side of the sea, they arrived in the region of Gerasenes. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. As soon as Jesus got out of the boat, he was met by a man with an unclean spirit who was coming from the tombs. This man had been living in the tombs and could no longer be restrained, even with the chains. Though he was often bound with chains and shackles, he had broken the chains and scattered the shackles. Now there was no one with the strength to subdue him. Night and day in the tombs and in the mountains he kept crying out and cutting himself with stones. When the man saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees before him, and he shouted in a loud voice, "What do you want from me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, God, before God, not to torture me." Or Jesus already declared, "Come out of this man, you unclean spirit." "What is your name?" Jesus asked. "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus repeatedly not to send him out of that region. So, thousands of demons infecting one man is really scary, but I would argue that one hive mind infecting all of humanity is just as scary, if not more so, And I think the other thing that's interesting for me is this sense of living in a society or in a community where there is no conflict, there's no pain, there's no suffering. Isn't that what I'm aiming for? Like either in this life or the next, isn't the idea to be able to have fellowship and commune with people where you're not trying to fight each other in some ways or other. And I think one of the things that comes up a lot of the time is the descriptions of the early church in Acts. So Julia, I think we kind of covered this to some extent or other when we looked at Testament, and we looked at the way that after the day of Pentecost, they start to kind of take on this kind of communal living aspect. So I'll give you the exact line. Acts 2, 42-47. So this is, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favour of all people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. So, like that's great, but it didn't last. And the question I guess I have sometimes is like, did it not last because of moral failings in the early church, or did it not last just because that model just isn't physically sustainable, you know? And I guess my big question with all of the things that Nat has said about how great the world of Pluribus is why is it so unsettling? We're always positioned from Carol's perspective. We're always meant to see it as uncomfortable. And I think it comes down to it that it's forced on people. The question I had was like, is this what it's going to be like in heaven? Like there's perfect unity and there's no conflict and everybody gets on with each other all the time, and it sounds so cloying.
There would be no gossip, surely. And I know gossip is a vice or whatever, but surely there would be no gossip if that was the case. And I don't know about you, but gossip sustains me.
Gossip is your jam. So I've had some people describe heaven as being in a constant worship meeting or a constant prayer meeting, and you've been in these sort of meetings at church where they say this, and you're like, okay, and then come back and talk to Claire, and she's like, doesn't that sound terrible? Yeah, it sounds horrendous.
Can you imagine being in like don't get me wrong, I love a church hall. They are the backbone of English society, but they have a smell. Can you imagine just being in a smelly church hall for eternity?
Yeah. It's not
an eternal jumble sale.
Yeah, you guys, you and I go to very different churches. I'm realizing that now, you know, but it's the reason why it's so unsettling is because it's forced on people. There's no consent aspect, and the aliens decide they're going to experiment on Carol's eggs. They kind of do that very loyally bit of, we will never take anything from your body, you know, we will never experiment on you, Carol. They're not given her a choice. It's just a waiting game. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that was genuinely quite a heartbreaking bit for me, because especially, obviously, it was eggs that she'd frozen with Helen, with the express intent to later on begin a family with Helen, and now they're being used against her essentially. Yeah. And it's only because of that they're able to try and distill this cure, the virus specifically for her.
Yeah, and I think the question that's been left out of all our conversations, really, when it comes to utilitarianism, is just the issue of free will. You know, does it count as a utopia if you don't get to choose to be there, if you're just forced into it? Because to me, that sounds like it's more like hell. Just more like John
Stuart Mill higher value, like free will is one of those higher pleasures. So no, it wouldn't be.
So there we go. I think that is going to end our episode on Pluribus, because it needs to flipping end somewhere, ladies. Okay. A quick thank you to our patrons: Miss Sarah Cooper, Jonathan Wattis, James Pittard, Simon Sella, Philip Coleman, Lance Kane, and one Natalie Minaker.
That's me.
That's you.
Thanks.
I'm paid to be here.
Join us next week for our 100th episode, where we'll be doing the film all conservative Christians love to hate, The Da Vinci Code.
I can't wait for that.
Julia, have you had a good time?
I've had a great time. I always have a good time.
Natalie, have you had a good time?
I have had a time.
I've had a great time. You know, when I won't have a great time is when I'm editing this episode, which is currently coming in at like 15 hours long, you know?
I'm just saying, you put us here in this room together.
Yeah. I am the author of my own destruction. I appreciate that. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I don't know why I'm waving.
God in Film is hosted and created by Giles Scott.
That's me.
Mixing and editing by Giles. Our logo was designed by
Julie Walsh.
And our theme tune was composed by
Rick Lee.
Please rate and review.
Please give us 5 stars because that's a nice thing to do.